Have you wondered if you can compost in winter? The answer is yes, but there's a few things you need to know. In this video, I'll explain those, and I'm going to give you 4 tips to keep you composting all year long. At the end, I've got a couple alternatives for you to consider when you think about composting in winter. I'm Amy Landers with GardensThatMatter.com, where we believe your garden is the key to better food, a better life, and a better planet. Whether you're making compost so that you can use it in your garden, or you are trying to reduce your footprint by throwing less things away, maybe both, right? Composting is a great way to recycle food waste and organic matter, anything that decomposes, right? That decomposition is powered by fungi and bacteria, and there are even special bacteria that thrive at high temperatures. As decomposition happens, the function of the bacteria, the digestion, the reproduction, those are creating heat. And so we've got thermophilic bacteria in our compost piles that just really thrive in those high temperatures. But you might wonder, as a recent viewer wondered, what happens in winter? Here's what Debbie asked in a comment in our Quick Start to Composting series. What happens in the winter? I'm in the Midwest climate, Zone 5. I have a tumbler composter that I used in our city lot, but we've moved to a rural space with lots of room. I'll try your bin approach this year, but I'm wondering if I can still add kitchen scraps, coffee grounds, etc. to my tumbler. Good question. This is one we hear often. Let's start with the first part. What happens in winter? Well, in our compost bins, that bacteria is generating heat, most active in the center of the pile, in the freshest material, where it has both carbon and nitrogen. That's why we use a mix of materials, that bacteria need to eat both carbon and nitrogen. And so in our piles, sometimes the heat is escaping more quickly than the bacteria are producing it. And when that happens, their activity slows down. When the pile cools off, the thermophilic bacteria get less active. There's some other bacteria that work at cooler temperatures, and so they're still working. Fungi work at cooler temperatures. They're still working. So your compost pile is still very much alive. Now, depending on what your winters are like, you may have more or less activity in your compost pile. We live in the southeastern U.S., where winters are pretty mild. We get a little bit of snow, but we have some stretches of days where things are above freezing. We've got sunny days. And so our compost bins are probably slowing down, and then as there's a nice warm sunny day, things are getting active in there, kind of off and on. Now, if you live in a really cold place, like Debbie's Zone 5, your winters are pretty cold, and so sometimes things are freezing solid. And so in that case, when things are frozen solid, you're not going to have a lot of activity. But the good news is there's bacteria are still in there. The fungi are still in there. They've just gone dormant, right? And when it gets warm again, when the temperatures, the environment is right for them, they will be active again, which is great because it'll just take back off in the spring. Now, if you think about something like a bin, it has more mass, and so it's going to take longer to freeze solid than something that is smaller. So a smaller compost bin is going to be less active. And then when you think about a tumbler up off the ground, there's more surface area for that heat to be escaping from, and so a tumbler may freeze solid sooner. But does that mean that you can't add to it? No, it definitely doesn't. So let's jump into 4 tips to keep you composting all year long. First, you may want to upgrade your collection bin. In the summer, in the spring, and the fall, we're loving to go outside, empty our compost every day, every other day, taking it from the house out to the bin. But in winter, maybe you want to go a little bit longer. So you may want a larger bin, something to collect it in for a few days, maybe once a week, go out and the sunniest day of the week, take your compost out, right? And so you might want something like a 5-gallon bucket, or have a couple of collection bins so that you can save it up and then bring it out all at once. With a bigger bin, maybe you can find something that fits under your kitchen sink, or you might keep it in your garage or on your porch, depending on if we kept ours on our porch, it would be eaten by our dog, so we can't do that. But it's one thing you can consider. If you have some extra space in your freezer, you could even freeze your scraps. It's not going to hurt them. And then bring them out and dump them into your compost as you need the room. No problem if they go in frozen. They will thaw eventually. The second tip I have for you is to continue to add to your compost bin regularly. Even if it's frozen solid, you can still add material on top. Now, what you don't want to happen is to save up food scraps all winter long, or, like in your freezer, you have a whole freezer full of food scraps, and then suddenly you're going to try to add all that nitrogen-rich green kitchen material at once. You want to be bringing it out, collect it up for a while, bring it out, mix it with some brown material so that you're getting some nice layers. If you live in a place with a mild winter, you are going to have activity in your pile. So bringing that material in is going to keep it active. If you have a frozen pile, it's no problem. It'll just be frozen, and then come spring, it'll be ready to go. Now, I mentioned adding brown materials when you add kitchen scraps to your compost. And if your brown materials are out in the open, there's a chance that they are going to get wet and frozen as well. So one thing you might consider is having them in a bin or a garbage can, where you can open that garbage can and really easily get some dry material, some brown material, leaves or shredded leaves, shredded paper, shredded straw or hay. Those things, if you make it super easy, then you're not going to get discouraged from composting in the middle of winter. It'll be easy to come empty your compost bin, get some of that material, and cover it up. Tip number 3 is to cover your compost bin to keep the snow and rain from running into it. And so you can see here we've got a tin cover, just a piece of tin. A tarp would do the same thing. And the idea here is you don't want cold melting snow and cold winter rain dripping down through your pile, because that is definitely going to slow down those bacteria if they are active in there. And if you live in a place that gets quite a bit of snow, this cover means that you would be able to kind of lift it, push the snow off so that you can get to the pile to add every week or two. You won't have to be digging through snow to get to your pile. Tip number 4 is for those of you who really want to keep your compost pile as active as possible all winter long, and that is to insulate. If you feel like really going after it, you can insulate your compost bin. Think about having a bin made out of hay bales or straw bales. You could use pine straw for this too. If you go for hay or straw, you do want to be sure that it doesn't have persistent herbicides, so you might want to go organic for that. But often you can find spoiled hay, and that would be a cheap way to be able to make a compost bin. Just stack them up like bricks and make the compost bin in the center. You could also use bags of leaves for insulation. That might work really nicely around a wire bin. Just line it all around with bags of leaves. Just make sure they're thick bags so that you don't have the bags disintegrating and making a mess in your compost. To be honest, if you're just looking for a laid back way to compost, you don't have to do the insulation step. It's still going to happen. It'll happen slowly. But if you continue adding material and if you cover it to keep the snow and the rain from dripping through, that compost is just going to kind of slowly decompose, and come spring thaw, everything will speed up in there. You'll be able to turn it, mix in the material, maybe harvest out of the bottom. The bottom will be pretty close to finished, and then you can turn it and get the rest of that material heated back up again, and you'll have compost for your spring garden. Now, I did promise to share 2 alternative ideas with you, and those are both related to composting inside. You can compost inside your house or garage or basement, even your apartment, with worm composting, vermicomposting, or bokashi, which is basically like a fermentation. And so if you want to keep composting in winter, but you don't really want to be out in the elements of winter, consider an indoor composting alternative method. Now, whichever way you go, I hope that you will continue composting all year long. If you have more questions about composting, let me know in the comments down below. If you found this video helpful, tell me and give me a like. And as always, subscribe for more garden goodness. We also invite you to come over to gardensthatmatter.com, where you can explore classes and our blog and additional videos. Thank you so much for watching, and until I see you again, happy gardening! Going? We're live? Action? Ready? Camera? Action? Lights. Camera. Action. Is the right thing to say. I can't do it without smiling at the camera.
Do what?
Pretend. I look like I'm planning something evil because I'm